allies like Australia for major equipment purchases, for submarines and aircraft, so that we can benefit from complementary analysis and larger scale economies. We should also examine carefully the Australian system of depoliticizing defense procurement through an arm's length system with an independent body. Governments are elected to lead, not to embark on time-consuming policy reviews in search of answers. If we do not know what we are trying to achieve in terms of defense policy or why, no amount of study will provide the answer. A commitment to promote innovation in Canada's industrial and technological sectors should also be at the forefront of defense procurement policy. It's no accident that countries that are global technological and innovation leaders like Israel and Sweden also have strong defense industrial bases. The parallel level of security for Canada is here on our own continent, and I have three brief suggestions to share with you in this regard. NORAD, is showing its age. The threat from Soviet bombers is no longer the major challenge to North American security, as the realignment of many functional responsibilities to the U.S. Northern Command aptly demonstrates. To guard against more contemporary threats, we need to give serious consideration to a joint role in the U.S. anti-ballistic missile defense system that will protect us from countries like North Korea, which are investing heavily in developing a long-range nuclear missile capability. It will also rejuvenate NORAD and our defense partnership with the United States. We cannot, as Canadians, given the extraordinary bravery and tradition by those who represented us and fought and died in World War I and World War II in Korea and elsewhere, we cannot subcontract our responsibility for national security to our southern neighbor, no matter how secure we may believe ourselves to be, relying exclusively on America for continental security. It is fundamentally a matter of self-respect. Canada needs to contribute more than rhetoric to a genuinely shared security partnership. Secondly, we should make a concerted effort with the United States to bolster our common interests and common concerns about the Arctic territory we also share. There are new threats in the region, and not just from Russia. There are also exciting and new opportunities which we can harness together beyond the security realm. Taking the initiative on enhanced cooperation with the U.S. in this vital region would be a pragmatic example of self-interest based on common values. But the basic point is to find constructive common ground on which to engage the Americans in this noble enterprise. The same is true of cybersecurity, what many see as the most serious new threat to global prosperity, as well as to global security, comes from the cyber realm. The internet is the hidden wiring of the global economy and the Canadian economy. As McKinsey and Company pointed out recently, the internet contributed $6.3 trillion US, or 8% of global GDP, in both direct value and productivity as of 2014. But this reliance has created its own vulnerabilities to cyber attacks from criminals and others who operate in the dark recesses of the internet. We need a more enlightened approach to intelligence sharing, and we need to invest more to ensure that we can thwart cyber attacks that threaten not only the intellectual property that underpins our economy, but also the critical infrastructure on which so much of our economy depends. We also need a new kind of partnership between government and the private sector to strengthen the resilience of our institutions as they apply to cybersecurity. So my message to you in conclusion is somber, but sanguine. The doomsday clock has moved to 3 minutes to midnight, the highest alert since 1984, with growing asymmetric threats and access to advanced technologies at the top of the list. Institutions that have ensured a welcome degree of stability in global affairs are showing their age, and many, like NATO, are due for rejuvenation and a more sharply defined sense of purpose. Canada has the proper credentials to play a significant role in redefining the mission of NATO and safeguarding our own security. But we cannot meet that objective by offering to hold the coats of those more willing to invest. We need to be equipped and ready as necessary to fight to preserve our values, our Canadian values. If we expect to be taken seriously by our allies at the meeting in Warsaw, our commitment to security will need to offer more than the prospect of further study about what we aspire to do in the name of defense. The lessons of history are clear. Naivete or isolationism never lead to peace. They simply become invitations to the forces of darkness. Modesty in defense of global peace and stability is no virtue. Vigilance, commitment, and burden sharing are essential to the defense of our fundamental freedoms and the core values of our democracy. Think back to where Sir John was the day after the 1st of July, 1867, 149 years ago, when he woke up the next morning after the celebrations. There were 4 tiny provinces hugging the American border. The great American armies were still very much at war and active. And there was the wish for manifest destiny from the South. And yet MacDonald held it together and built our magnificent country, soon to be 40 million people. We were 4 million that day, soon to be 40 million. One of the greatest, most responsible, thoughtful, generous, and prosperous nations in the world. And he built it with his vision and his courage and his bare hands. That's what he did. The question is, what are we going to do as we face new threats? Not to Canada immediately, but to our civilization that we have built with our great immigrant populations and their contribution to our well-being and the sacrifice that everybody has made for Canada. The Old Testament says that young men have visions and old men dream dreams. Well, great nations like Canada need a combination of both, visions and great dreams. And it is up to this generation to ensure that those values that were established in NATO 67 years ago are maintained and strengthened, because they alone can ensure the freedom and the prosperity and the life of our children and our grandchildren and theirs. Thank you all.